The cargo ship Defiant Wanderer shook like an old washing machine as Captain Sarah Chen tried to keep it together. Sparks flew from the control panel, and the lights flickered on and off. The hyperdrive was making a sound that no hyperdrive should ever make, like a cat being strangled by a vacuum cleaner. "Come on, you piece of junk," Sarah muttered, hitting the console with her fist. Sometimes that actually worked. This time it didn't. Her engineer, Mike Torres, crawled out from under the engine access panel. His face was covered in grease, and his expression said everything Sarah needed to know. "It's dead, Captain," Mike said, wiping his hands on his already dirty coveralls. "The hyperdrive just gave up. We're stuck in normal space until I can figure out what went wrong." Sarah looked at the star charts. They were supposed to be delivering mining equipment to the Kepler colony, but now they were nowhere near their planned route. The navigation system showed empty space, no colonies, no shipping lanes, nothing. "Where exactly are we?" asked Jenny Wu, their communications officer. "Good question," Sarah replied, checking the sensors. "According to this, we're in the middle of nowhere. No recorded star systems, no traffic, no—" The proximity alarm started screaming. "Multiple contacts," Jenny shouted over the noise. "Huge ships coming fast." Sarah looked at the main screen and her jaw dropped. 12 massive ships were approaching them. These weren't normal cargo haulers or passenger ships. These things were enormous, each one bigger than a city block. They were sleek, dark, and covered in what looked like weapons. "They're hailing us," Jenny said, her voice nervous. "Put them through," Sarah ordered. The main screen filled with the image of an alien creature. It had blue-gray skin, 4 arms, and eyes that glowed red. It wore what looked like a military uniform covered in medals and strange symbols. When it spoke, its voice was deep and commanding. "Unknown vessel," the alien said. "You have entered Imperial space without permission. You will surrender immediately, and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Sarah blinked. She looked around at her crew. Mike was still holding his wrench. Jenny was drinking coffee from a mug that said, "World's okayest communication officer." Their ship was held together with duct tape and hope. Sarah said into the communicator. "Sorry about that. We had engine trouble and ended up here by accident. We're just a cargo ship. Can you give us some time to fix our hyperdrive so we can get out of your way?" The alien stared at her. Its red eyes seemed to glow brighter. Sarah could hear other voices in the background speaking in a language she didn't understand. They sounded confused. "You will surrender," the alien repeated, but it sounded less sure than before. "Look," Sarah said, trying to be polite. "I don't know what your deal is, but we're not surrendering. We haven't done anything wrong. Our hyperdrive broke down and we ended up here. It happens. Can you just point us toward the nearest repair station?" On the alien ship, Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet was having the strangest conversation of his long military career. In 50 years of service, he had contacted over 200 different species. The pattern was always the same. First came fear, then desperate attempts to negotiate, then either surrender or a futile attempt to fight. No species had ever asked him for directions to a repair shop. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "the alien vessel is not powering. Weapons. Their shields are down. They appear to be waiting." Kethavar studied the human ship on his screen. It was small, old, and looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Parts of it were different colors, as if they had been replaced many times. He could see what looked like metal tape, holding some sections together. "Run a scan," he ordered. "What kind of weapons do they have?" "Sir," the tactical officer replied after a moment, "they have one plasma cutter. It appears to be designed for cutting metal, not combat." "One weapon?" "Yes, sir, and it's currently being used to open a stuck cargo container." Kethvar was confused. Every species they encountered had at least some weapons, even if they were primitive. These humans had brought a tool to a space battle. "Admiral," the communications officer interrupted. "The human is speaking again." Sarah's voice came through the speakers. "Hello? Are you still there? Look, I know this is probably some kind of territorial thing, but we're really not trying to cause trouble. We're just trying to deliver some mining equipment. If you can tell us which way to go to get back to human space, we'll be out of your hair. Kethavar had never heard of human space before. His intelligence reports covered every known civilization in this part of the galaxy. How had an entire species escaped Imperial notice? "Bring me the file on humans," he ordered. "Sir," his aide replied, "there is no file on humans. This is first contact. First contact with a species that acted like they had been neighbors for years." Kethavar decided he needed to see these creatures in person. "Human vessel," he said. "I am Admiral Kethavar of the Zephyrian Empire. You will come aboard my ship for formal contact procedures." "Okay," Sarah replied immediately. "Do you have a shuttle bay we can dock at? Our shuttle is pretty old, but it should make the trip." She said it like she was visiting a friend's house. 30 minutes later, Sarah and 2 of her crew members walked into the shuttle bay of the Imperial dreadnought Eternal Dominion. The bay was huge, big enough to hold their entire cargo ship. Hundreds of Imperial soldiers stood at attention, their weapons gleaming. Sarah looked around and whistled. "Wow, this is a nice ship. Must have cost a fortune." The soldiers looked at each other. No one had ever called their warship nice before. Admiral Kethavar met them at the entrance to the bay. He was even more impressive in person, 8 feet, tall, covered in armor and surrounded by guards. "Welcome aboard," he said in his most commanding voice. "Thanks," Sarah replied. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen. This is my engineer Mike Torres and my communications officer Jenny Wu. Sorry about the mess we've caused. We really didn't mean to barge into your space like this." She stuck out her hand. Kethavar stared at the hand. In his entire career, no one had ever offered to shake hands with him. Usually, they were too busy being terrified. Slowly, he reached out with one of his forearms and shook her hand. "You are not afraid," he said. "Afraid of what?" Sarah asked. "You seem like reasonable people, reasonable beings, whatever the correct term is. Sorry, this is our first time meeting your species. We are the Zephyrian Empire," Kethavar said. "We control 12,000 star systems. Our fleets are the most powerful in the galaxy." "That's impressive," Sarah said. "You must have a really good logistics system. We can barely keep one cargo ship running." Kethavar had no idea what to say to that. He decided to stick to protocol. "You will come with me," he said. "We must complete the contact procedures." "Sure thing," Sarah said. "Lead the way." As they walked through the corridors of the massive warship, Sarah kept looking around with interest. She asked questions about the artwork on the walls, complimented the lighting system, and wondered aloud about how they managed to keep such a big ship clean. Kethavar had conquered star systems with less effort than it was taking to have a simple conversation with this human. Something was very wrong here, but he couldn't figure out what. Admiral Kethavar led the humans to the main conference room of his ship. The room was designed to impress and intimidate. The ceiling was 50 feet high, covered with paintings of great imperial victories. The walls displayed weapons from conquered worlds. At the far end sat Kethavar's command throne, elevated above everything else. Sarah walked in and looked around. "This is a really nice conference room," she said. "Very spacious. Good for big meetings, I bet." The Admiral's aide, Sub-Commander Yeeth Al, nearly dropped his datapad. No one had ever called the sacred chamber of Imperial authority a conference room before. Kethavar sat on his throne and gestured for the humans to stand before him. Instead, Sarah walked over to one of the side tables and started examining a ceremonial sword. "Is this real metal?" she asked. "The craftsmanship is amazing. Mike, come look at this." Mike Torres walked over, completely ignoring the hundreds of Imperial guards lining the walls. He looked at the sword like he was examining a piece of machinery. "Nice work," he said. "Hand-forged, looks like. Must have taken weeks to make." "That weapon," Kethavar said, "belonged to the war chief of Altair 7. We defeated his armies and took his world." "Oh," Sarah said, putting the sword back carefully. "Sorry for your loss. she said to the room in general, not sure if anyone there had known the war chief personally. Kethvar stared at her. She had just offered condolences for the enemy he had defeated. Please sit down, Kethvar said, trying to regain control of the situation. Sarah looked around for chairs. There weren't any. Visitors to the throne room were supposed to stand or kneel. It's okay, we can stand, she said. Though if this is going to take a while, maybe we could grab some chairs from somewhere? Sub-Commander Yithal quietly ordered some guards to bring chairs. No one in the history of the Empire had ever asked for furniture during a conquest ceremony. Once everyone was seated, Kethvar began the formal contact speech he had given hundreds of times before. You have encountered the might of the Zephyrian Empire, he announced. Your species will now be evaluated for incorporation into our civilization. You will be given imperial citizenship, and your world will be brought under our protection. That's very kind of you, Sarah said. But we already have a government. The Terran Federation works pretty well for us. Thanks for the offer, though. Kethvar paused. Species didn't usually turn down imperial citizenship. You do not understand, he said. This is not an offer. This is how contact with the Empire works. All species become part of the Empire. All of them? Jenny Wu asked. That seems like a lot of paperwork. How many species are we talking about? Sarah added. You said 12,000 star systems. That must be hundreds of different races. 843 species, Kethvar replied automatically. Wow, Mike said. How do you keep track of all their different laws and customs? Do you have some kind of computer system? This was not going according to plan. Kethvar decided to try a different approach. He gestured to his aide, who brought forward a large crystal tablet. This is the Codex of Imperial Law, Kethvar said. It contains the rules your species must follow as Imperial citizens. Sarah took the tablet and started reading. It was heavy and covered in dense text. After a few minutes, she looked up. There are some problems with Section 47, she said. It says all trade must go through Imperial merchants, but Section 92 says all citizens have the right to free commerce. That's a contradiction. Kethvar blinked. No one had ever read the Codex during first contact before. Most species were too terrified to ask questions. And this part here, Sarah continued, about military service. It says all citizens can be drafted, but it also says military service is voluntary. Which is it? The Codex is sacred law, Kethvar said. It is not questioned. Oh, I'm not questioning it, Sarah said. I'm just pointing out some editing errors. Do you have a legal department that handles updates? These kinds of contradictions can cause real problems down the line. Sub-Commander Yithal was frantically taking notes. In 800 years of Imperial expansion, no one had found errors in the sacred codex. Let me ask you something, Sarah said, leaning forward. What happens if we don't want to join your empire? I mean, we're just a cargo ship. We're not really equipped to make decisions for our entire species. Refusal is not possible, Kethvar said. The empire always expands. It has never been stopped. Okay, but what if we just leave? Jenny asked. Once we fix our hyperdrive, what's stopping us from going home and pretending this never happened? Kethvar realized he had never been asked that question before. Usually, by this point in the Yao process, species were either surrendering or trying to fight. They didn't ask about leaving. You cannot leave, he said. You have been contacted. The process has begun. What process? Mike asked. The process of Imperial integration, Kethvar explained. First comes contact, then evaluation, then incorporation. And if we fail the evaluation? Sarah asked. Kethvar hesitated. Usually, species that failed evaluation were destroyed or enslaved. But something about these humans made him reluctant to say that. Species that fail are dealt with, he said. Dealt with how? Sarah pressed. The room fell silent. The guards shifted nervously. Even they weren't used to prisoners interrogating an admiral. Admiral, Sub-Commander Yithal whispered. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately. But Sarah was already reaching into her jacket. Every guard in the room tensed, hands moving to weapons. She pulled out a thermos. "Anyone want coffee?" she asked. "I made extra this morning." The guards looked at each other in confusion. She had just offered to share beverages with her captors. "What is coffee?" Kethvar asked. "It's a hot drink," Sarah explained, unscrewing the cap. The smell filled the room, rich, dark, and completely alien to the Zephyrians. "It helps you stay awake and think clearly. Very popular among humans." She poured some into the thermos cap and offered it to Kethvar. "Want to try it?" Kethvar stared at the small cup. In his military career, he had been offered bribes, threats, and desperate bargains. No one had ever offered him a hot beverage. Slowly, he reached out and took the cup. The coffee was bitter and strange, but not unpleasant. As he drank, he realized something disturbing. These humans were treating this entire situation like a business meeting, not a life-or-death encounter with a galactic superpower. "Good, right?" Sarah said. "The secret is to not overbrew it. A lot of people make that mistake." As Admiral Kethvar sat in his throne room, drinking coffee with three humans who had just critiqued imperial law and offered beverage advice, he began to suspect that this first contact was going to be very different from all the others. He was right. 3 weeks after the first contact, Admiral Kethvar was getting reports that made no sense. More human ships kept arriving in Imperial space, and none of them seemed to understand how first contact was supposed to work. The first problem started when a human cargo ship called Lucky Strike showed up at Imperial Station Nexus 7. The station commander, Captain Vorthak, followed standard procedure. He sent fighters to escort the ship and demanded surrender. The human captain, a woman named Maria Santos, responded by asking if the station had docking permits available and whether they accepted Terran credits for payment. "We are not a commercial facility," Captain Vorthak had explained. "This is a military station of the Zephyrian Empire." "Oh," Maria had replied. "Do you know where the nearest commercial station is? I've got a cargo hold full of Earth food and I'm looking to trade." Somehow, this conversation had ended with Maria setting up a small restaurant on the station's commercial deck. She called it Authentic Earth Tacos, and within 2 days, there was a line of alien customers waiting to try human food. Captain Vorthak had never dealt with anything like this. His security manual covered invasions, smuggling, and terrorist attacks. It didn't cover what to do when the enemy set up a successful business. The second problem arrived in the form of a research vessel called Scientific Progress. Dr. James Wright, a xenobiologist, had heard about the new alien contact and came to study Zephyrian culture. He docked at Imperial Station Gamma 12 and immediately began asking questions. Not demands or threats, just questions. He wanted to know about Zephyrian family structures, their educational system, their art, their music, and their mating rituals. The station commander, Colonel Zethir, tried to follow protocol by placing Dr. Wright under arrest. But Dr. Wright kept talking throughout the entire process, asking if Imperial prison systems focused on rehabilitation or punishment, and whether they had studied the effectiveness of different correctional approaches. By the end of the day, Colonel Zethir found himself in a 3-hour discussion about criminal justice theory. He had learned more about human sociology than he had ever wanted to know. The third problem was the worst of all. The passenger ship Golden Sunset had gotten lost during what humans called a retirement cruise. 150 elderly humans had been touring nearby star systems when their navigation computer malfunctioned. They ended up at the Memorial Station of Glorious Victory, the Empire's most sacred military site. The station was built around the preserved wreckage of the last ship that had dared to resist Imperial expansion. It was a place of reverence and fear, where young Imperial officers came to understand the price of defying the Empire. The elderly humans thought it was a museum. They wandered around taking pictures, asking tour guides about the historical significance of various artifacts, and complimenting the realistic battle damage effects. One elderly woman, Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, told the station commander that it was almost as good as the Civil War Museum back in Virginia. When the station commander tried to explain that this was a real battlefield where thousands had died, Mrs. Henderson patted his arm sympathetically and said, "Oh, honey, all the best museums have tragic stories. That's what makes them educational." Admiral Kethvar received reports about all of these incidents. He also received intelligence briefings that were even more disturbing. His spies had managed to intercept human communications, and what they learned made no sense. According to the messages, humans had discovered a new trade route and friendly aliens who were very helpful with directions. There was no fear, no concern about Imperial military might, no recognition that they had encountered a galactic superpower. The humans were treating the entire Zephyrian Empire like a tourist destination. Worse, Imperial citizens were starting to respond positively to human contact. Maria's taco stand had become so popular that other stations were requesting human food vendors. Dr. Wright's research papers were being read by Imperial scientists who found human perspectives on xenobiology fascinating. The elderly tourist had left such positive reviews of the memorial station that it was seeing increased visitor traffic for the first time in decades. Admiral, Sub-Commander Yethal said during their daily briefing, "We're receiving requests from 17 different stations asking for human visitors. The citizens seem to find them entertaining." Kethvar rubbed his forehead. In his military training, he had studied every form of resistance the Empire had ever encountered. There had been military resistance, diplomatic resistance, technological resistance, and even psychological resistance, but no one had ever resisted the Empire by being aggressively friendly. "What's the status of the original human ship?" he asked. "The Defiant Wanderer is still in our repair bay," Yethal replied. "Engineer Torres has been working with our technical staff to fix their hyperdrive. He's been very educational." Kethvar didn't like the sound of that. "Educational how?" "Well, sir, our engineers have learned 17 new ways to fix broken machinery using what humans call duct tape. Also, Engineer Torres has introduced them to something called percussive maintenance, which is hitting broken equipment until it works." Kethvar stared at his aide. "And does it work?" "Surprisingly often, sir." The Admiral decided he needed to see Captain Chen again. She had been given guest quarters on his ship while her engineers worked on the hyperdrive. According to the reports, she spent her time reading Imperial history texts and asking the ship's library computer questions about Zephyrian culture. He found her in the observation deck, looking out at the stars while drinking coffee from that thermos of hers. "Captain Chen," he said. "Admiral," she said, turning with a smile. "Perfect timing. I just finished reading about the Imperial expansion into the Andromeda sector. Fascinating stuff. You guys really know how to organize a large-scale operation." "It was a military conquest," Kethvar said carefully. "I know," Sarah replied. "But the logistics must have been incredible. Moving that many ships across interstellar distances, coordinating supply lines, managing communications delays. It's really impressive from an organizational standpoint." Kethvar sat down across from her. This was exactly the problem. Every other species saw Imperial expansion as terrifying military aggression. Humans saw it as an interesting management challenge. "Captain," he said, "do you understand what the Empire is?" "Sure," Sarah said. "You're a large interstellar government that's been around for thousands of years. You've got good technology, strong military, efficient bureaucracy. Honestly, it's pretty impressive." "We have conquered every species we have ever encountered," Kethvar said. "That's one way to expand," Sarah agreed. "Though it must create a lot of administrative overhead. How do you handle cultural integration? Do you have different legal systems for different species, or do you try to standardize everything?" Kethvar realized that Captain Chen was genuinely curious about Imperial governance. She wasn't afraid of being conquered. She was interested in how conquest actually worked as a political process. "Most species surrender immediately," he said. "They recognize our superior strength and submit to Imperial authority." "Makes sense," Sarah said. "No point in fighting a war you can't win. Much more practical to negotiate terms peacefully." "But humans haven't surrendered," Kethvar pointed out. Sarah looked confused. "Were we supposed to? I mean, we're just a cargo ship that..." got lost. It's not like we represent human government or anything. I can't surrender on behalf of my entire species." "Then who can?" Kethavar asked. "Nobody, I guess," Sarah said. "We don't really work that way. Humans don't have emperors or supreme leaders. We've got lots of different governments, but they're all elected. If you want to talk to humanity as a whole, you'd need to contact the Federation Council. But even they can't make decisions for everyone." Kethavar felt a cold sensation in his stomach. "How many human governments are there?" "Oh, dozens," Sarah said cheerfully. "Maybe hundreds depending on how you count. And that's just in our local space. Who knows what's out in the outer colonies?" The Admiral realized that the Empire had not made contact with a species. They had made contact with a civilization so large and complex that no one could speak for all of it, and that civilization was spreading into Imperial space one lost cargo ship at a time. The emergency session of the Council of Hierarchs was the largest gathering of Imperial leadership in over a century. Representatives from all 12 major sectors had come to the Imperial capital to discuss what they were calling the human problem. Supreme Hierarch Vexen, ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, sat at the head of the Great Council chamber. Around him, the most powerful beings in the galaxy argued about what to do with a species that wouldn't behave properly. "The situation is unprecedented," announced General Thakmor, head of Imperial Intelligence. "In 6 weeks we have documented 47 separate human incursions into Imperial space. Each one has been different, and none of them follow any recognizable pattern of invasion or colonization." He activated a holographic display showing the location of each human contact. Red dots appeared scattered across the three-dimensional map of Imperial space. "Here," he said, pointing to a cluster of dots, "we have the cruise ship incident. 150 elderly humans toured our most sacred sites, rated them on something called TripAdvisor, and left positive reviews. Our memorial station has become a popular tourist destination. Here," he continued, indicating another area, "we have the merchant incidents. Human traders have established commercial relationships with 17 Imperial stations. They're selling something called coffee that has become popular with our citizens, as well as various food items and entertainment media. And here," he pointed to a third cluster, "we have what appear to be research expeditions. Human scientists are studying our culture, technology, and biology. They're publishing papers about us in something called academic journals." Supreme Hierarch Vexen leaned forward. "What do our analysts make of this pattern?" General Thakmor gestured to his intelligence chief, Colonel Kixra, who had been studying human behavior for weeks. "Supreme Hierarch," Colonel Kixra began, "our initial assessment is that humanity is conducting the most sophisticated pre-invasion reconnaissance in galactic history." A murmur ran through the council chamber. "Explain," Vexen commanded. "Consider." "The evidence," Kixra said. "First, they sent a seemingly disabled cargo ship to test our response protocols. When we reacted according to standard procedures, they showed no fear. This suggests they already knew they could handle our military capabilities. Second, they immediately began inserting commercial and research assets into our territory. This is clearly intelligence gathering disguised as peaceful contact. Third, and most disturbing, they're conducting psychological warfare against our population. Their food, entertainment, and cultural products are specifically designed to make our citizens comfortable with human presence." Admiral Kethavar, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "Colonel, with respect, that interpretation assumes a level of coordination that I haven't observed. The humans I've met seem to be acting independently. That's what makes it so sophisticated," Kixra replied. "They've created the appearance of random civilian contact to hide their true intentions. No military would be this chaotic unless it was deliberate misdirection." General Thakmor nodded. "We've analyzed human historical records, Supreme Hierarch. What we found is concerning." He activated another display showing Earth's military history. Images of human warfare flashed across the screen. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, modern conflicts, and space-based military operations. "Humans have been fighting wars for their entire recorded history," Thakmor said. "But not just against other species. They fight each other constantly. Their planet has never known universal peace. So? Asked Hierarch Zelthu from the mining sector. So they're the most experienced warriors in the galaxy, Thakmor replied. They've been perfecting combat tactics for thousands of years against opponents who know all their strategies. Any species that can survive in that environment must possess military capabilities we can't even imagine. He brought up more data. Look at their recreational activities. They intentionally put themselves in dangerous situations for entertainment. They climb mountains, jump from aircraft, swim with predators, and consume toxic substances for pleasure. They've domesticated their planet's apex predators, he continued. Creatures that were designed to hunt and kill them are now their companions. This suggests a total lack of normal survival instincts. Or, said Admiral Kethvar quietly, it suggests they don't see those things as threats. The room fell silent. Think about it, Kethvar continued. What kind of species befriends their predators? What kind of civilization consumes poison for fun? What kind of military allows elderly civilians to wander around enemy territory? He stood up, his forearms gesturing as he spoke. I've spent weeks with these humans. Captain Chen reads our military history like it's entertainment. Engineer Torres fixes our advanced technology with primitive tools and makes it work better. Dr. Wright asks questions about our biology that our own scientists never thought to ask. They're not afraid of us because they don't need to be afraid of us, he concluded. Supreme Hierarch Vexon was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting, Admiral? I'm suggesting that we're dealing with a species so advanced that our most sophisticated technology looks primitive to them. They're not using advanced weapons because they don't need advanced weapons. They're not following invasion protocols because they don't need to invade. They can achieve their objectives just by being friendly. Colonel Kixra shook her head. That's impossible. We've scanned their ships. Their technology is clearly inferior to ours. Is it? Kethavar asked. Or is it just different? Engineer Torres showed our technicians how to repair quantum drive systems using metal tape and impact adjustment. Our engineers spent weeks trying to understand how that was possible. Their cargo ship, held together with primitive materials, just traveled across interstellar space. Their elderly civilians toured our most secure facilities and our guards couldn't find a reason to stop them. Their merchants set up businesses on our stations and our commanders couldn't figure out how to shut them down without looking unreasonable. Hierarch Nimtar from the research sector raised a question. What about their military? Surely we can analyze their combat capabilities. General Thakmor looked uncomfortable. That's problematic. We can't locate their military. What do you mean? Vexon demanded. Every human ship we've encountered has been civilian. Cargo haulers, passenger vessels, research ships, merchants. We haven't seen a single military vessel. Where is their fleet? Asked Hierarch Zelthu. We don't know, Thakmor admitted. Either they don't have one, which seems unlikely given their military history, or they're so confident in their abilities that they don't need to send warships, Admiral Kethavar finished. The council chamber erupted in concerned chatter. The idea of a species so powerful that they could expand without military protection was terrifying. Supreme Hierarch Vexen raised his hand for silence. What do our xenopsychologists say about human behavior? Dr. Lithara, the Empire's leading expert on alien psychology, stepped forward. She looked nervous. Supreme Hierarch, she began, human psychology doesn't match any known patterns. Most species develop either aggressive or submissive responses to superior force. Humans seem to have developed a third option, complete indifference to displays of power. They treat our warships like traffic obstacles. They regard our military stations as shopping centers. They view our sacred sites as tourist attractions. This suggests either complete ignorance of danger, which seems unlikely given their intelligence, or complete confidence in their ability to handle any threat. We might pose, Vexen said grimly. Dr. Lithara nodded. There's one more thing, Supreme Hierarch. We've detected no fear pheromones, stress hormones, or other biological indicators of concern in any human we've tested. They're not pretending to be calm, they actually are calm. Even when threatened? asked General Thakmore. We haven't managed to threaten them successfully, Dr. Lithara admitted. Every attempt at intimidation has been interpreted as either a cultural greeting or a request for information. Supreme Hierarch Vexen stood up. The massive chamber fell completely silent. Based on this analysis, he said slowly, the Council must assume that humanity possesses military capabilities far beyond our current understanding. Until we know more about their true strength, the Empire cannot risk direct confrontation. What are your orders, Supreme Hierarch? Asked General Thakmore. Vexen looked around the chamber at the most powerful military force in galactic history. Admirals who had conquered star systems, generals who had never lost a battle, intelligence officers who had brought down entire civilizations, and they were all afraid of a species that had wandered into their territory by accident. Prepare for strategic withdrawal, he said. The withdrawal of the Zephyrian Empire was the largest military operation in galactic history. 12,000 star systems had to be evacuated or abandoned. Millions of ships had to be relocated. Entire fleets that had patrolled the same space. Lanes for centuries were suddenly racing toward the Imperial core worlds. The operation was called Strategic Repositioning for Enhanced Security, but everyone knew what it really was. The Empire was running away. Captain Sarah Chen was in the engine room of the Defiant Wanderer when Admiral Kethaver came to see her. Mike Torres had finally figured out what was wrong with their hyperdrive, a blown fuse that cost 12 credits to replace. Captain, Kethavar said, I need to speak with you. Sarah looked up from the engine diagnostic display. Sure thing. Admiral. Mike, how much longer on that drive alignment? Give me 10 more minutes, Mike replied from inside the engine housing. This Imperial tech is actually pretty nice once you understand how it works. Kethavar waited until they were alone in the corridor outside the engine room. He seemed nervous, which was strange for a military commander. Captain, he began, the Empire has decided to adjust our territorial boundaries. Oh? Sarah said. Is there some kind of problem? No, Kethavar said quickly. No problem. We're simply reorganizing our space for better efficiency. That makes sense, Sarah agreed. Large organizations need to restructure sometimes. Are you consolidating operations or expanding into new areas? Consolidating, Kethavar said. We're pulling back from several outer sectors to focus on our core territories. Smart move, Sarah said. It's better to manage a smaller area well than to spread yourself too thin. My company learned that lesson the hard way. Kethavar realized that Captain Chen was giving him business advice about abandoning half the Empire. Captain, he said, as part of this reorganization, the Empire is prepared to recognize human territorial claims in the sectors we're vacating. Sarah blinked. What territorial claims? We don't have any territorial claims. We're just a cargo company. But other humans will come, Kethavar said. More ships, more traders, more tourists. They'll need somewhere to go. I guess that's true, Sarah said. There are always humans looking for new places to visit or do business. Are you sure you want to give up all that space, though? It seems like a lot. We're certain, Kethavar said firmly. The Empire believes this arrangement will be beneficial for both our peoples. Well, if you're sure, Sarah said. I can pass the word along when we get back to human space. I'm sure the Federation Council will want to send proper diplomats to work out the details. That won't be necessary, Kethavar said quickly. The Empire prefers to minimize formal contact for now. We'll establish communication protocols later, when both our peoples have had time to adjust to the new situation. Sarah looked confused. Are you sure? Usually when you're handing over territory, you want to have clear agreements about borders, trade rights, navigation lanes, that kind of thing. The Empire trusts human judgment in these matters, Kethavar replied. This was technically true. The Empire trusted human judgment so much that they didn't want to be anywhere near it. 3 hours later, the Defiant Wanderer was ready to depart. The hyperdrive was working perfectly. Their cargo hold was restocked with supplies, and they had detailed star charts showing the safest route back to human space. As they prepared to leave, Admiral Kethavar made one final transmission to Captain Chen. Captain, he said, On behalf of the Zephyrian Empire, I want to thank you for this educational experience. Thank you too, Admiral, Sarah replied. You've been very helpful. If you're ever in our part of space, look us up. I'd be happy to show you around. I will keep that in mind, Kethvar said, knowing he would never ever take her up on that offer. As the human cargo ship jumped to hyperspace, Kethvar turned to his aide. Send a message to all Imperial forces. Any ship encountering humans should provide assistance and then withdraw to minimum safe distance. What is minimum safe distance, sir? Sub-Commander Yethal asked. 500 light-years, Kethvar replied. At least. The news of humanity's territorial gift spread through human space faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, hundreds of human ships were exploring their new territory. They found abandoned Imperial stations, empty colonies, and vast stretches of space that were suddenly open for exploration. To the humans, it looked like the luckiest break in colonial history. Free territory, existing infrastructure, and friendly aliens who had been helpful with directions. Maria Santos expanded her taco business to 17 different stations. Dr. Wright published a best-selling book called Our Galactic Neighbors, a cultural guide to the Zephyrian Empire. The passengers from the Golden Sunset organized follow-up tours to the amazing alien historical sites. Back on Earth, the Federation Council was puzzled but pleased. They sent diplomatic missions to establish formal contact with the Empire. But somehow the Imperial representatives were always busy with internal reorganization and suggested they maintain the current informal arrangements for the foreseeable future. The Empire established a new border, 500 light-years from the nearest human settlement. They called it the Cultural Exchange Boundary and posted signs in 17 languages warning that the area beyond was under human administration. Imperial. Citizens who asked about the withdrawal were told that it was part of a long-term strategic initiative to explore alternative diplomatic approaches with promising new galactic neighbors. Nobody mentioned that the Empire was afraid. The truth, which became clear over the following months, was that the Zephyrian Empire had misunderstood humanity completely. Humans weren't advanced warriors using sophisticated psychological warfare. They were just humans. Curious, friendly, adaptable, and utterly incapable of being properly intimidated by anything. Captain Sarah Chen never learned that her broken hyperdrive had triggered the largest military retreat in galactic history. She went back to hauling cargo between human colonies, occasionally telling people about those helpful aliens we met who had given us directions to some really nice territory. Admiral Kethvar kept his position, but was quietly transferred to a research posting in the Imperial Core worlds. He spent his remaining military career writing tactical manuals about unconventional resistance patterns and non-standard first contact scenarios. He never wrote about coffee, duct tape, or little old ladies with cameras. Some military secrets were too dangerous to put in official reports. The Zephyrian Empire learned to coexist with humanity by the simple strategy of staying far away from them. It worked well for everyone involved. Humans got new territory to explore and friendly aliens who waved from a distance. The Empire got to keep its reputation as a galactic superpower, as long as nobody asked too many questions about their new borders. And somewhere in Imperial space, at a small station that sold Earth food to alien tourists, Maria Santos hung up a sign that said, "Best tacos in the galaxy, as rated by 847 different species." She was probably right.